and Wolverine's animal factor.
I could have told you that, bub. Giant monsters, everybody plays.
Not giant, yay big.
Welcome to the Pull Bag. Join us as we dig out our latest comics and discuss them with the rotating panel of the GCRN crew. So sit back and enjoy this week's Pull Bag.
Hey, this is Steve Bloom, and you are listening to the Geekcast Radio Network. Hey, bub, I keep telling you, don't call me Wolvie! Snicked.
Hello and welcome to the Pull Bag. This is episode 20. I am your host, TFJ and Mike, and holy crap, Canada has invaded the Pull Bag. Jesus Christ. Help me. Please help me, somebody. I'm joined by...
You need more help than any of your listeners can give you.
I know, sadly, isn't it? All right, so there you go, folks. Ryan the UnEvenFlow is back.
Yeah.
You heard him last week, basically listing off every comic he's ever bought.
Oh, I didn't come close to listing all of them.
It's called exaggeration, dude.
Oh, fine.
Yeah. And also we have JT from Saskatoon. Hello.
Hello, and don't worry, Mike, and under our benevolent dictatorship, you will be well cared for.
Right.
No, he won't be.
Ever happen.
Well, you gotta lull him into a full sense of security before you throw him in the dungeon.
Well, he's not a Canadian citizen, so he doesn't get our free health care.
That is true.
Anyway, we're here tonight to talk about Marvel Comics. In general, originally this was kind of going to be what we'll do in a few weeks with DC pre and post New 52, but I didn't realize that the Marvel quote-unquote relaunch, basically they just said, hey, let's put a giant sticker with an exclamation point on it. Marvel now!
It was a very soft relaunch, and I mean, they gave creators the choice, really, of what they wanted to do, and the majority of them chose to not really do a lot. And I mean, some of them were already well on their way, like Dan Slott and Superior Spider-Man was already well into its storyline of introducing a new Peter Parker, quote-unquot.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
How many spoilers do we want for that? But, you know, Marvel...
Well, JT and I just reviewed, about 3 weeks ago, JT and I just reviewed issues 8 through 11. So, I mean, if people don't know what's going on, Amazing Spider-Man 698 to 700, there was a body switch, and then the Superior Spider-Man is one of Peter's greatest villains. There, that's telling you what happens without actually spoiling who it is.
I like the fact that this week we found out that Castle was smart enough to know something's up with Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah, I didn't pick that one up.
Yost writes him quite well. I was surprised.
You know something's wrong when the Punisher is telling you to cool down.
Pretty much, yeah. But, I mean, back to Marvel... I think one of the other things to note here, too, is that you in particular, Mike, like one of the reasons you didn't get into comics is because of all of the history and everything. Well, DC, just to be blunt about it, DC has been around longer and actually ran its run longer than Marvel. Like with Marvel, take something like X-Men as an example. X-Men was canceled for years. It didn't run for a really long time, and that's something that didn't happen with someone like, say, Flash or Green Lantern, who started in the 50s and 60s and never stopped. Marvel at least has these sort of breaks with things that happened, and I mean, they didn't become Marvel until later. I mean, they were originally Timely Publications, that's it. And then they were Atlas for like a decade or so, and eventually finally became Marvel Comics.
Yeah, they got started in 1939. The publisher back then was Martin Goodman. Yeah, they started a year... Well, DC launched in 38, right?
Yeah.
But before, yeah. So basically, Marvel came along a year later. Well, not necessarily Marvel, but, you know...
what would eventually become Marvel, but, but not with any of the characters that we'd associate. DC, at least, launched pretty quickly into some of the characters well, I should say relatively quickly into some of the characters that are still around today.
Yeah, Nash was in national periodicals or publications, something like that. Was on the trade dress originally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Oh. I mean,
it still wasn't DC Comics yet, but I mean it got there.
And got there.
Much like the mutants, they went through a couple of evolutions before they got to the Merry Marvel Marching Society that we all know today.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and I mean for Marvel Comics too. I mean the other thing to kind of take away from it is, and let's just be absolutely blunt with it here. Stan Lee, in a lot of ways, is Marvel Comics. It probably wouldn't exist in anything resembling what it is today without Lee. And yes, he had a lot of people who helped him with it, but he really brought the majority of the characters that we associate with Marvel into the limelight. And there are other runs. There's, Chris Claremont's X-Men run is the one that made most of the X-Men popular, and they've had numerous cartoons, movies, and everything based off of Claremont stuff. So I mean, a little bit unlike DC is a little more fractured. There's more creators to mention when you're talking about them. With Marvel, you've got those two big ones that I think any comic book fan knows the name of. Certainly Stan Lee.
Yeah. Yeah, and really, you're right. I didn't. The only thing as a kid I remember reading DC versus Marvel, that 4-issue miniseries.
No, you never read Amalgam Comics?
Yeah, they eventually had the Amalgam Comics, most of which, by the way, were absolutely.
No. This was before that. This was the original 4-issue battle with the two gods, the blue god and the red god, or whatever the hell it was.
Yeah, the brothers.
Yeah, that's what I had read originally.
Well, no, because I mean, with me, I started reading reprints and everything, basically the old Marvel comics that my dad had left with my grandma, years ago, and I kind of grew up for a while reading late 60s, early 70s Marvel stuff. Primarily Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. And that's really one of my favorite periods of Marvel, is that kind of post-Silver Age, getting into the whole 70s vibe, the country's in the crap or the president's a dick, that sort of thing. And that was some of the areas that you had stuff like Thor going to the future and meeting the original version of the Guardians of the Galaxy, Fantastic Four, just anything out of the early 70s. I love Fantastic Four style going into the 80s. And, when you talk about Marvel now, this really isn't anything new. I mean, they're putting a trade dress on it. They're really pimping it. But this is not the first time they've done this. I mean, you look as far back as post the Onslaught saga in the mid-90s where, I know, Professor X is possessed by the evil of Magneto and develops a split personality and then becomes its own creature. And
don't forget teenage Tony Stark.
Oh, God, why would I ever want to remember that?
Okay, now, hold on.
No, I'm just saying.
Hold on. In defense, not necessarily of that comic series, because I never read it, but in defense, the Iron Man Armored Adventures cartoon series, the teenage Tony Stark, and that is actually damn good.
No, I don't disagree. I love that show.
This is sadly something completely different, though.
Because I mean, what they did with you don't mind, Ryan, is Tony Stark.
Oh dear God, no! Go right ahead. If I have to remember it, my head will start hurting.
Yeah. There is this Avengers The Crossing crossover where it's revealed Tony Stark is a mind-controlled minion of Kang the Conqueror who kills several Avengers, also Rands and some supporting characters. And the Avengers decide the smartest thing they can do is go back in time and bring into the present day a 19-year-old Tony Stark who just happens to take an energy blast to the chest and has to get a mechanical heart and joins the Avengers, and then Onslaught happens. And this is where I'm getting at, is what they did is they canceled Avengers, Iron Man, Captain America, and Fantastic Four, because they're all believed to have killed or been killed in the final Onslaught battle. And they had Heroes Return, which is kind of a big thing for Marvel at the day, because this is where they brought back Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld back into the fold, and they were each running 2 of these books as artists and general editors. Although Liefeld flaked about 5 issues in, and well, it's not a big surprise because it's Rob Liefeld. But
Yeah,
this was
since then, this is pretty much his MO.
yeah. So I mean, they canceled those comics. They renumbered their number ones. They're in this alternate world that Franklin Richards created when he still had his reality warping abilities. And then eventually they cancel after about a year, which was basically their first experiment in trying to maybe pull off a DC reboot in that they updated all these characters with these new stories. But I think they knew very early on that it wasn't going to pan out, so they just did the year, brought them back with a new number one. And then...
So basically what I'm getting from all this is Marvel has been rebooting since the early days. All as they do with their reboots is they just, hey, let's go back to number one.
Oh, they both have. I mean, DC's rebooted themselves and tried to... The big thing with DC was they frequently tried to shift tone. They've always kind of been trying to be a little more edgy and dark. Like they've sort of been trying to shake the Silver Age DC, the Silver Age idea of DC fans have of them for probably a good 10, 20 years. They were trying to shake that through the 80s and 90s, and I'd say they still tried to do it in the early 2000s. And in a lot of ways, stuff like 52, not the new 52, I mean the Event 52, and Blackest Night and that stuff was them still trying to reach that sort of darker, edgier ground that Marvel had kind of pulled off back in the 90s to... Sometimes it was successful, sometimes not. I mean, the one big difference between the two companies is DC has really only a couple anti-heroes. Batman is one, or vigilante anti-heroes. Batman, to a certain extent, is one. Green Arrow's been one before, et cetera, et cetera. Marvel's filled with them. And those are the ones that get relaunched the most often, for whatever reason. Like, Ghost Rider's had 800 different series over the years.
That's true. The last one involved the Ghost Rider becoming a woman.
Yeah, that was
so not good.
Oh, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with...
The Spirit of Vengeance didn't help anything.
No,
that's just fun to watch when you're drunk.
Well, one of the things, too, I mean, bringing in the movies, Marvel now is a way, and that's one of the things they've done, is they've shifted some of the characters into more the characters from the films. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you read some of the Iron Man, I'll use the actual series name. If you read some of the Iron Man, he's a lot more in line with the Robert Downey Jr. Tony Stark than he was with some of the ones from the 90s and early 2000s. And It's not necessarily a bad thing, and it makes sense for them to shift some of these characters into more of a movie mode. They'd be stupid not to be honest. But, yeah, I suppose for some longtime fans it could be jarring if it had just happened, but I mean, it's one thing that's happened over time. Oh, with the exception of Nick Fury and his random color changes.
Yeah.
Red, blue, yellow, purple.
Well, I was thinking more of his race changes, because, I mean, he's...
Well, I was trying not to...
Yeah, I know, but...
Well, no, but, I mean, you look at the renumbering, because, I mean, they did that after Heroes Reborn, where they renumbered those titles. They also did it with Spider-Man, where they canceled most of, like, the 8 titles they had at the time. They had Peter Parker and Amazing. But then they kept, after a few months, they started running the original numbering. And it's like, really, this was just their attempts at creating jumping on points for a character, so you wouldn't necessarily have to go back and read, Avengers 1 through, say, 500 or whatever.
Mm.
And
both companies have done that over the years, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you look at Marvel, like, and again, trying to do the reboot. I mean, that was basically the genesis of the Ultimate Universe, and that was a little more intended to be the replacement for, the Marvel 616 universe, but it just became so popular they started running them besides everything. Is this Marvel isn't willing to do what DC does and completely, I wouldn't say necessarily say negate, but they're not really to call a do-over. But they'll restart a title just to bring in more readers. But it's just kind of annoying that, every 2 years they're going to do something like this. Because that's what it seems to happen.
It's funny because I actually prefer it this way, because you get more of a sense of an author's take on that character. I'm not a fan of what DC has done in the picking and choosing the background for their characters. I feel like that's a lot easier for somebody to do, and in a lot of ways it simply becomes fan fiction at that point. You can kind of go like, hey, this event didn't happen to him, but this one did, and it's almost sort of a cheat. I prefer to see the writers have to deal with some of the fallout from previous events and have to get past that if it's something they didn't like, or something they want to skip over or just not want to deal with, whatever. But there's something almost sort of disingenuous in just hitting a reset button and deciding, none of this happened.
Yeah. Well, that's really what I'm kind of getting at with that, is just that there's almost no there's almost no cause half the time. It's just like, oh, okay, we're going to cancel this, we're going to start it over again. I mean, I understand with the Marvel, it kind of ties into the Marvel movie universe a bit. They want to get kind of more of a cohesive whole, like more of a, each title is in its own individual stable, which is kind of what they did in the mid-90s, where, there was the Spider-Man family of titles, there was the X family titles, there's the Avengers family titles, and stuff like that. So, I don't know.
I don't know. All as I know is with Marvel, I'm still like, in the future here in the pull bag, we'll probably be doing character months where we take 4 or 5 episodes and they'll be specific to that character, whether it's a Marvel character, DC character, whether it's Transformers, whatever it is in the future. But I'm going back and I'm looking at, because I like Wolverine just like the next guy. Everybody loved him in the 92 cartoon. I enjoyed both of Steve Bloom's version, both in Wolverine and the X-Men and Superhero Squad. So I'm going back and looking through trades for Wolverine. I'm, obviously, JT and I are doing Superior Spider-Man. As far as Spidey goes, I'm just sticking with what we're doing now with that. I don't think I'm ever going to go back and read any of the old Spider-Man trades, because I've said it a million times before, and I know people are tired of hearing me say this. There are only so many damn stories you can tell with Peter Parker.
True.
And it's one of those things where, to me, Ryan, you mentioned earlier about, those Silver Age fans, they like their Silver Age thing. I remember somebody said, I think it's a quote-unquote mutual friend of JT's and I, he's like, I have no interest in reading Aka's Spidey.
Yeah.
Whatsoever. And it's like, hey, fine, if that's your thing, fine. I find it interesting and fascinating because it's just something I had never seen before done with that character.
But that's the benefit of doing this sort of soft relaunch every few years. If you have somebody who doesn't like that or doesn't like that version of Spider-Man, guess what? Wait a couple of years and the other one's probably going to be back. Some new creator is going to come on and they're going to do another soft relaunch. I mean, I had to endure the nightmare as a Punisher fan that was Matt Fraction and then Rick Remender writing it. And during that time, I also got to endure Joss Whedon write it, which was freaking awful. Some of the worst stuff ever written. But then afterwards, I mean, jumping into, Jason Aaron started on the Max series, which was one of the better runs on it. And then Greg Rucka's absolutely amazing series. And I mean, the thing with the Marvel writers right now, you look at somebody like Daredevil. It's a character that's been around forever and has this really long history. But if you were to, say, pick up and start reading Daredevil at #1 when Mark Waid took over, this is recently, or reasonably recently now, it's been a couple of years. But I mean, if you were to start there, Waid has done such a good job building the universe or rebuilding it that you don't necessarily need any of the old knowledge. You need sort of the basics, but I mean, you can get that from reading the Wikipedia page for 2 minutes, or even if you had watched the not-so-good Ben Affleck Daredevil movie, the basics of him. He was blind, he can see, sees through radar, blah, blah, blah. And
Daredevil is one of the best, my favorite titles in the current, Marvel Now relaunch after like Hawkeye. Because yeah, you basically even read it's mentioned in passing throughout that first issue what Daredevil's deal is, and this is everything. It's like almost a year past the Shadowlands storyline where he took control of the Hand Ninja Clan and was possessed by the devil and killed Bullseye again, yeah, like you said, Wade has not only built but rebuilt the Daredevil mythos and he brought it back. He's taken it all the way back to the original Daredevil in the 60s and early 70s where it was fun. He was like this. He was basically a blind Spider-Man, cracking wise while cracking skulls.
Well, and
that's what's been so fun.
You mentioned the other one that got relaunched that I wanted to bring up too, and that's Matt Fraction's Hawkeye. And I mean, his Hawkeye in that has absolutely nothing to do with any continuity, really. It's basically all it is Hawkeye on his days off from the Avengers. If you've seen the movie, the Avengers, or hell, if you've only seen Hawkeye in Thor, you can still pick that up and you already know everything you need to know. There's nothing else to it. And I mean, I mentioned that Fraction is an outstanding writer, his Punisher run notwithstanding, and a couple other not so great ones, but every writer has some not very good stuff in their closet somewhere. But yeah, his Hawkeye is another one that you don't need any prior knowledge, and it's not that it wiped out the past with, the Marvel Now relaunch. It's just they basically ignore it. You don't need to know it. And the really good writers can do stuff like that. They're able to ignore that past, or they acknowledge it with one line that you're not missing anything if you don't catch it.
Yeah.
Well, that's... sorry, you go, Mike.
And that's one of the things where that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode, so I could find out, honestly, more about some of this Marvel stuff. Because like you guys said, with Mark Waid's Daredevil, I could start there. Yes, I've seen the movie, regardless of Ryan's opinion of it. Yes, I will agree. The theatrical cut wraps everything up a little bit too much, but that director's cut version was so much better.
Yeah, the director's cut was a huge improvement.
Yeah.
I still wouldn't say it was a great movie or anything. I'd say it was pretty.
I like it. I'm not saying.
I'd say no. I would say it's solid. I definitely wouldn't say it's bad. I would say the theatrical movie leaned toward version leaned towards bad. The director's cut. For people who didn't like Daredevil, if you get the chance, track down and watch the director's cut and give it another chance. Although never ever pick up Elektra.
No.
In fact, just
Jennifer Garner.
Yeah.
I love her to death. Thank you for Alias, but no.
Well, it wasn't her fault. That movie was bad. Again, you could have cast anybody in that, and if Robert De Niro was in it, it would have been terrible.
Okay, at what point did Typhoid Mary have the power to rot things? Because as far as I knew, she was just crazy and good with blades.
I've always been okay with different interpretations of characters for movies because some things in comics don't work. My bigger issue with it was the movie was just terrible. Yeah. There wasn't even if everybody.
The reason why the movie was terrible, at least in my opinion, was you've got the same director that did Daredevil, Mark Steven Johnson. And I guess, and you guys can tell me if I'm right or wrong here, I assume in her history, she comes back to life. See, that's what kind of pisses me off about Daredevil and Elektra is because the theatrical cut version, when I saw it, I'm like, oh crap, she's dead. Oh no. And then there was that thing at the end of, I will always find you, or I will always know where you are, or whatever. And then we get Elektra, and she's reincarnated, and I'm like, oh God, really? This kind of takes away the emotional value of what Daredevil had.
Well, yeah. No, I mean, it's the Marvel, like, they're a little more, I wouldn't say polished, but they're definitely more abrupt with moving the movie stuff into the comic universe. Because, I mean, you look at the new Nova title, which is, again, I think it's Nova, Hawkeye, are two of the best ones coming out of the Marvel Now. And in recent issues of Nova, they've brought in the Chitauri from the Avengers movie, who apparently have always been out there in the Marvel universe, out in space, and they're like this, no one wants to mess with them because they're so badass and shit. And I was like...
They didn't appear out of left field. They've been mentioned and that sort of thing, and they've actually appeared before way back when. So it's nothing new, but yeah, they never had like the role that they've had until now, and it's pretty obvious it's because of the movie's success.
Yeah, because I mean, the original, as far as I'm aware, the original mention of the Chitauri was in Ultimate Fantastic Four, or it was in the Ultimates, and then it was revealed in Ultimate Fantastic Four that Chitauri are basically the Ultimate Skrulls. That's as far as I knew. But you look in just to step back a couple years. You look at Fraction, and was it David Aja who'd work on Hawkeye, and you look at the complete turnaround they did on Iron Fist. Because I mean, before they did that series, Iron Fist was this dude who wore, this pimp collared kung fu unitard with ballet slippers, and they turned him around and made him a complete kung fu badass. And not only did they do that, they recreated Iron Fist's mythos, like what happened on Daredevil, and they completely rebuilt his world and made it like this huge epic storyline. And that's the one thing that I love about Marvel over DC some days is like, if you find the right guys, like Mark Waid on Daredevil and Fraction on Iron Man and Iron Fist, because his Iron Man run was epic too. There are some people, if you find the people with the right passion, they create goddamn gold.
Rucka's Punisher run, which was a runner-up for an Eisner, actually it was Wade's Daredevil that beat it out, but that's another one. I mean, all you needed to know about Frank Castle, they even removed Vietnam from him, and I'm fine with that. Basically, just he was a soldier, his family was killed. That's all you needed to know. There was no backstory necessary at all. And
it's like Peter Parker Spider Bites Spider-Man. There you go.
Yeah, and that's all you really need. Now, you can play with that. I notably am a big fan of what Joe Michael Straczynski did, where he sort of turned Peter Parker's origin sort of upside down.
He introduced that element of mysticism, it's like the chicken or the egg sort of thing of Spider-Man. Was it the spider or was it the radioactivity?
Yeah, and I actually liked that. I didn't mind sort of revisiting it and changing it around a bit. And I mean, again, with the sort of soft relaunches that Marvel does, whether it be Marvel Now or whatever, if you hated that, again, wait a couple of years and it was gone. I mean, they redid it in a nightmarishly terrible story that most people have trying to forget, but still.
That's how it is.
Stupid Brand New Day.
Yeah, never make deals with the devil.
Yes.
Well, that was
even if he's a character in it was Brand New Day is what came out of it. And One More Day was the actual event. Yes. A 4-issue miniseries or whatever, and then it became Brand New Day, which was also not great.
Oh my god, I am just imagining now a Spider-Man movie with Jack Nicholson in it. Tell me, have you danced with the devil in the pale moonlight?
Oh god.
Yeah, Marvel stuff is, now that I hear you guys talking about it, there's, because like I said, I enjoy a lot of the characters that Marvel has. I just enjoy them in other mediums, like cartoons, like films. JT, you mentioned Nova.
Yeah.
I will never read that character once, so I hate that character. And it's all Ultimate Spider-Man's fault. He's a huge dick in that cartoon.
Oh, no. I gotta stop you right there, Mike. The current volume of Nova and the previous volume with the original Richard Rider Nova, those are honestly some great comic books, and you do yourself a disservice. At least the current one, just because his name is Sam Alexander, he is not nearly the douchebag that he is in Ultimate Spidey.
Well, we've had the same, Mike and I have had the same argument, too, that Booster Gold was a douchebag in the animated DC stuff, but the 52 version and then post-52 version of him was fantastic. They really sort of turned that origin around with him. Yeah. And it's one of those things that you can do with comics when you play around with the origin or play around with the characters. It's one of the things I like about comics in general, is that there's different interpretations for everyone, and that's started to extend to the movies too. I mean, you look at Batman, Chris Nolan's Batman is completely different from pretty much any other version of it.
Yeah. It is.
And
very much.
and I'm fine with that. I mean, I remember most notably, and this made me really sad. I remember really notably on Reviews on the Run, Victor Lucas hated The Dark Knight Rises because he was angry because, well, Batman never quits. Well, Batman's been around for 60 some odd years. It's open to different interpretations, and Nolan's version of him, it didn't feel out of place for him to want to quit. I mean, it was clear that that's where it was headed for him, or he was going to die. It's one or the other. And I was okay with it. And that's one of the reasons I like reading comics, is there's so many different versions. And yeah, I don't like all of them, but if you do, more power to you. And if you don't like it, well, there's plenty of other stuff. Not only that, but it doesn't erase, 50 years of some of these characters existing.
If I ever read a Booster Gold comic, as long as his origin is not dumbass media mogul from the future come back to the present to realize he's useless. Like, that's my whole...
That's his origin, though, Mike.
When I watched The Greatest Story Never Told, that was my biggest problem with the character, just watching that episode of Justice League Unlimited, was that he's a douche, a popular douche in the future that comes back to the past, and no one realizes, everybody's just like, you're the next guy in line. And I just don't.
His redemption in 52 is what sold it for me. In the end, I really liked that event because it gave focus to a lot of the minor DC characters. And that's kind of one of the other differences between the two major companies, is that DC has their A-listers, which is pretty much Batman, Superman. In terms of comics, you have to add Green Lantern. And then that's kind of about it. I mean, people know who Aquaman is, but is he all that popular? They don't necessarily have a B team either. There's almost this sort of drop-off. And then you look at somebody like Marvel, and they've got their A team, which right now, you have to include guys like Iron Man and Captain America on it. Although you could make a point that maybe Cap is like on the B team. But then they've got a solid roster that most people know of beyond that. And I mean, even their minor characters, people know the names of, whether you've read a comic a few times or not.
Yeah. Like I said, for me, Marvel characters, I don't know. I love the Claremont stuff that was done in the X-Men 92 series. So I guess I could find trades for that. Where would I start, now for X-Men? Because if I was going to start... And I'm not saying that I'm going to start reading X-Men. I'm just asking, where do you guys think... I love those characters, but I love the characters from the 90s. If the current X-Men doesn't... I probably wouldn't pick it up if it doesn't have Wolverine, Storm, Cyclops, Gambit, Rogue.
Well, the one thing you can look at, there's the current Wolverine and the X-Men series, which is basically Wolverine rebuilds. Because a few years ago, the Xavier School was blown to bits. They all moved out to the West Coast. And then Avengers vs. X-Men happens. And just before that happened, Wolverine split from Cyclops. Is like, we can't just always be prepared to fight. These kids need a future. So he rebuilds the school and christens it, I think it's the Jean Grey School for Gifted Youngsters.
Jean Grey Academy of Higher Learning.
Thank you.
And I'm a big fan of Jason Aaron. So.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I just couldn't remember. So basically, Wolverine is Professor X now. And it's, mutant teenagers and just trying to basically live their lives, and they run into the new version of the Hellfire Club, which is also these preteen multi-billionaires who are also complete and utter assholes. And
it's ridiculous fun too. I mean, that's the thing. One of the things is Wolverine is playing the role of Xavier. The issue here is that he's still Wolverine. He's not very good at that role. He's doing the best he can, but it's not something he's really... Yeah. He's more capable in terms of running around and stabbing people. He's not necessarily fit to teach children how to fit in or how to survive.
And then you bring in Kitty Pryde's the vice principal.
Storm is one of the teachers, as is Rogue. Gambit is a teacher.
Iceman.
Yeah, they've got a number of the 90s X-Men. And then, the other thing to note about Wolverine and the X-Men is it walks that line between so stupid it's awesome really well in a lot of issues. It is ludicrous fun. I liken it to some of the issues. It's as if you're reading Army of Darkness. It's so bad, it's outstanding.
Because there was an arc where this Frankenstein monster, who's in charge of like this supernatural version of the circus of crime, comes to town and like possesses the adult X-Men and makes them like attractions in their show,
including Wolverine being a clown.
Barfo or Puko or something. The clown.
I think it was Bafo or something like that.
Yeah, where he basically they beat him up and he heals and he pukes and they do it all over again. And it's up to all these kids who are like unsure of their powers and everything to, save the teachers. And the guy who kind of spearheads the charge is this guy named Quentin Quire, who is a major character in the Grant Morrison run that resulted in like Jean Grey being dead for like the 5th time. He's basically like a telekinetic, telepath, anarchist mutant. He has to come save the day, along with all the other students. And one of my favorite characters in the Wolverine and the X-Men is Brew. Brew is, the Brood from X-Men, don't you, Mike?
No.
Okay, they're Chris Claremont's versions of the Xenomorphs from the Alien movies.
They appeared in the cartoon series. They were the ones that Wolverine was the only one who got away from them in an episode. It was like an alien ship that crashed.
Yeah. They implant their spawn in him and they take over your body. Brew is a mutant brood. He is educated. He is erudite. He speaks with a proper British accent, probably, and he's
basically Beast's best friend.
Yeah, he is a mini Beast. And then at one point, one of the Hellfire kids, he gets shot in the head. He goes into a coma, and now he comes back. He's all like snarly, normal brood now. And the big arc now is this girl named Edie, who's like this conflicted mutant with hot and cold powers, like literally fire and ice, from Africa, and she goes to join the new Hellfire Academy in order to find the guy that shot Brood and kill him. And it's all about Wolverine and everyone else trying to find this school and deal with the Hellfire Club. And if you don't, and it's so stupid it's fun isn't your thing, you can look at the new Uncanny X-Men title, which is Cyclops and Emma Frost and Magneto have gone out and they've created this big underground complex, and it's the new Xavier School for mutants. Since the end of... They killed the Phoenix at the end of Avengers vs. X-Men. Oh, sorry, spoilers. And now, in that whole thing, Scarlet Witch reversed her whole no more mutants snafu, and now mutants are showing up all around the world again. And Cyclops is going on recruiting all the mutants that he can. There's a war coming. He's basically become Magneto.
Well, basically, to sort of... to make it easier for people, right now the X-Men family, the X-Books, there are 3 schools. There's Wolverine's Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. And by the way, while it is stupid fun, I should note it had one of the best moments of the year with the issue where Brew was shot. Was one of the sort of saddest comics in a long time.
Oh, yeah.
There have been other great comics over the past few years, but it's weird because Aaron can do the serious stuff really well still, too. But anyway, there's that. There's Cyclops' school, which you mentioned. And then, of course, the Hellfire Club is a 3rd school that's against the other 2 as well. So,
yeah, and some of the kids from Wolverine have defected to that one. They also have all new X-Men, which is basically Beast, who is... I guess because of Avengers vs. X-Men, his mutation was killing him or something. And in order to, and that's kind of a side plot, he goes back in time and brings the original 5 X-Men to the future in order to show them what has happened so he can send them back and try and ensure that it won't happen. And they're all so horrified by what they see. They're like, screw that noise, we're staying here. And then Angel joins... Cyclops' academy, like he skips out on Wolverine and everyone else.
And here we get into one of the problems with Marvel is too many teams, because I know all this, I read most of these books, and you're giving me a headache. So
yeah, My brain hurts. I think if I'm gonna get into X-Men, I'm gonna get into the old stuff, the old Claremont stuff. I don't think I'm gonna be reading any new X-Men.
There's that, or I mean, just pick one team and stick with it. You're not missing anything by not touching the other ones. The events, particularly in Aaron's book, the events of the others don't bleed into his. He just sort of chooses to ignore them, which for the most part has been a good call.
And that's one of the best things overall of Marvel now, is that a lot of the titles, their stories, unless it's a specific crossover, they're entirely self-contained.
Yeah.
Like Wolverine and the X-Men, like I said, if you want to read X-Men, I would totally recommend that one, because that one, it's enough of the 90s cartoon that you get that. It's more or less the classic setup of, the mutant school. Iron Man right now is, again, he's off in space and he's part of the Guardians of the Galaxy, and yet somehow he's still on Earth. I don't think they've explained that.
In terms of, just to, again, simplify it for anybody, if I were to recommend books from Marvel now to pick up since the relaunch, Daredevil's probably second on my list. Number one would be Hawkeye.
Yeah.
2 is Daredevil, and third is tough. See, third would be easy for me normally. I'd recommend Rucka's Punisher, but they canned it, so he could be on Thunderbolts, which has been terrible, by the way. Good call on that, retards.
Yeah.
I do not like Daniel Way. At least he's leaving now, so it may improve significantly. Anyway, I don't know who to put third. I'm really tempted by Wolverine and the X-Men, but that's sort of a personal choice.
How many issues have come out for Wolverine and the X-Men so far?
31.
Okay, so it'll definitely be traded then.
Yeah, it's in.
That's really the way to read it.
The first 3 trades have come out.
Okay.
I mean, they're all readily available.
Yeah.
Are they at 30? I think they're at 36 already now, actually.
Something like that. I just picked up the new one today. I forget what number it is.
Yeah, for me, it's going to depend on the character. Right now, I'm okay just doing Superior Spidey for Marvel. JT didn't know this a couple weeks ago until now, but we will also be doing. Is it a 4 or a 5 issue miniseries for Superior Carnage?
I think it's a 4-issue mini.
We'll be doing that as well.
Yeah. You mentioned you like Wolverine, and Wolverine has a lot of the same problems as the Hulk and the Punisher, in that he's frequently cursed with not very good writers. And in terms of good Wolverine runs, it's kind of been a while. Jason Aaron's run was okay. It wasn't great, but it certainly wasn't bad. It's one of the better ones in the last few years. Basically, the last really solid Wolverine run was Mark Millar's Enemy of the State. This is in my opinion, though.
Right.
Certainly people can argue with that. But Millar's Enemy of the State is a good one. It's another one. You really don't need any backstory. Ninjas.
Enemy of the State and Agent of
Ninja's
S.H.I.E.L.D.
bad, Wolverine kill lots of things. That's all you need to know.
Somebody, one of my friends on Twitter and another podcaster I've listened to since 2008, Michael David Sims from Earth-2.net. I asked him and I asked Twigs Mike Laidman for suggestions on Wolverine on Twitter, and Mike Sims said Not Dead Yet, Enemy of the State, Weapon X, and the original Wolverine miniseries by Miller.
Yeah, and I was trying to Frank Miller's. I was trying to go recent, and that's of those. I mean, Millar's Enemy of the State is the most recent one, and certainly, going back and reading those other ones, they were really good reads. In a lot of ways, Frank Miller's run is what would end up defining the character. Probably as much as Chris Claremont, bringing him into the X-Men team way back when. So, yeah, those are definitely big ones. Those old, Claremont X-Men's, too, if you're a big fan of Wolverine, are great ones to go back to. And, you've seen the cartoon show. I think you'd have a blast reading the Chris Claremont stuff.
Yeah, I've seen all of the cartoons.
Yeah. And each one takes...
I haven't seen Pride of the X-Men. I don't ever want to see Pride of the X-Men, but starting with 92, I've seen X-Men 92, I've seen X-Men Evolution, even though I wish I could erase it from my memory.
It wasn't
And
bad. I liked some of the later
uh,
stuff, especially the Apocalypse
yeah,
theme
no,
stuff.
that and when it came to its ending, it wasn't that bad. The beginning, though, oh
Yeah, I
my
wasn't a fan of the
god.
whole like conflicting schools sort of thing, basically.
Yeah, no. And then Wolverine and the X-Men, which was basically got shafted after one season, which sucked.
I loved that series.
I
I was
Oh,
love,
ticked.
it was a great
love.
show, but I hate cliffhangers like that.
Well, I mean, it's not their fault. I would have been fun,
It's not, yeah, that's
obvious.
not,
I
yeah,
was same with, I mean, Superior Spider-Man or Superior Spectacular Spider-Man.
spectacular.
I
Yeah,
loved that series. Josh Keaton is, in a lot of ways, he is Spider-Man for me now, which is shocking because I mean, I grew up with the '90s one
with,
and the
with
original, I should say. But I mean, I loved that series so much, and that was another one who's really sad to see go.
Yeah.
and see that's the thing with Spider-Man over the years and voice acting. Like, oh god, JT, remind me, when did Shattered Dimensions come out?
Like what, 2, 3 years ago, something like that.
Yeah, everybody remembers Bumblebee as Spider-Man before he was Bumblebee. Dan Gilvezan. Everybody remembers Dan Gilvezan as the voice of Spider-Man in Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. 2, 3 years ago, you get Shattered Dimensions, and he's 2099 Spidey, and it's so much darker than what he ever did in Amazing Friends. And I was like, oh my god, that is so freaking awesome.
Oh yeah,
Spectacular.
that was
Good.
just the best thing about Shattered Dimensions. I mean, like you said, you had
Yeah,
Christopher Daniel Bonds, you had
yeah.
Josh,
You
you had
basically had
NPH.
everybody there.
Well,
Yeah,
Neil Patrick Harris was my favorite.
oh, no, 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 no.
What's wrong with that?
He has a decent voice for Nightwing and Under the Red Hood, but as Spider-Man, no. I do agree. Josh Keaton as Spider-Man was really good. I just could not get past the animation style in Spec Spidey. I got to go back and watch that series again to see if I'm going to like it anymore. But yeah, I mean, who knows what Marvel's going to do next? Is there anything else you guys want to bring up?
I guess the one thing I gotta say is Marvel, at least with their animated series, just to give in my 2 cents, is more so than DC. Like DC does excellent animated series. Do not get me wrong. It's Marvel puts a lot more effort into integrating the different, I guess, the different versions in one series. Because I mean, you look at Wolverine and the X-Men, prime example, and even Avengers: Earth Mightiest Heroes. Like they mixed in different characters, design elements. Like they try to bring everything together to give us the best possible package. And
Right, yeah.
really, that's one thing I love about Marvel, especially now in this age of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, how they're trying to bring everything kind of. They're trying to mix. They're trying to mix everything together somewhat, and that's kind of what I appreciate about it, because it's a lot. Marvel takes great care with that sort of thing, so it's not so heavy-handed.
Yeah.
They've started to get things right with their animated stuff. The problem is they keep canceling everything before it can get going. I mean, people seem to have forgotten that first season of Justice League was not all that good. I mean, even when you listen to the commentary, the producers and everyone that worked on it will admit that it wasn't great. And plus, they had this thing that every week when they wanted to introduce a new villain to show that he's a badass, he would beat up Superman in the first act.
Yeah,
I mean, poor Superman. Go back and watch the first season and count the number of times he gets knocked around. It's pretty frequent.
he just
So, I
looks
mean,
old.
yeah, people forget that it takes some time to build these shows, and unfortunately Marvel just isn't giving anyone the time. It goes for one season and that's it. And even the ones that start off really well for a season don't get to go on and improve. So, stop canceling things.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's one thing I'm almost loath to mention, like Greg Johnson, the guy who created Gargoyles. He's had, he is kind of the driving force between a lot of Marvel animated projects. Like a huge difference in making Spectacular Spider-Man as good as it was. And the same thing again with Wolverine and the X-Men. And it's almost because he goes in with a Bible and he's got a vision and he's got a storyline. He has like an end game planned out. But Marvel, for some reason, is like, we got 26 episodes out of you, you're done.
Well, that's pretty much what most, and this could be a whole other podcast, a whole other thing on animation. That's pretty much the thing. It's like, most of the time it's, let's get 65, that way we can have enough for syndication. But, the thing with specifically Marvel and also Transformers cartoons is that Marvel will have a series, say for example Wolverine and the X-Men, they'll do 26 episodes and be like, oh hey, X-Men First Class is coming out, so we can't have this cartoon anymore, we have to cancel that and do something else for this new movie. Or, same thing with Spec Spidey versus Ultimate Spidey. They were like, or Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes versus Avengers Ass, which is the new series. Because I've heard the new Avengers cartoon is nothing but ass.
It's not terrible, but it's nowhere near what Earth's Mightiest is. I'd say the same thing.
Yeah.
Like Ultimate Spider-Man is okay, but it's a shell of what Spectacular was, unfortunately. I mean,
yeah, I never got into Spec, and I love the humor in Ultimate.
so you take the storylines in Ultimate Spider-Man and add about like 10 layers of intelligence, and that's what you had with Spectacular. And I mean, it's also frustrating because in a lot of ways, Spectacular was a much darker show than Ultimate is too. I mean, you mentioned the animation style. Yeah, it was much brighter, but because of that, they were able to get away with doing a lot more adult things than they've tried on Ultimate.
Oh yeah, no, they went. Spec was very much a love letter to the comics, whereas Ultimate
and the '90s series too, I should mention.
Oh yeah. But I mean, Ultimate Spidey is like, I enjoy that show, but they are so ripping off the Teen Titans humor with the little asides and all that.
Yeah, Nova is essentially Beast Boy in my eyes.
No, and Beast Boy wasn't near that douchey.
Yes, he was.
No.
Yes, he was.
He wasn't a complete dick. Beast Boy he might have been a bit of a dick, but he wasn't a complete dick.
Both of the Teen Titans show, the old show and this new crappy kitty animated short shit, they both suck. But anyway, back to Marvel Comics. I'm really gonna start looking at some Wolverine stuff. I'm gonna start looking into some Punisher stuff, some Daredevil stuff. Eventually, I've said this before. Honestly, with any of us, it honestly comes down to cost. And right now, I'm spending anywhere between $90 to $120 a month for comics.
Wow, I'm not even spending that much.
Well, that includes trades though, because I'm buying a lot of trades.
Well, I'm not telling anybody what I spend in a week then.
Would we laugh or would we, pat you on the back?
You'd both probably cry, actually.
Yeah, we both probably cry, actually, because it's probably a whole hell. Ryan is someone who reads everything.
And I read a lot, like books and everything else, so I still average like a novel every couple days.
Jesus.
Yeah,
I read quickly, and I try to consume whatever I can, so...
Yeah.
That's fair, that's fair.
Alright, well, I know we haven't covered every single thing with Marvel.
Because that would take 8,000 podcasts that are 7 hours long.
Yeah, 7 hours long each, yes.
If I might suggest, Mike, or if I might make a suggestion, 3 titles that anybody that's listening to this should check out: Daredevil, Hawkeye, Guardians of the Galaxy, and I'll make it for Wolverine and the X-Men. I would suggest Superior Spider-Man, but I know a lot of people that want to burn Dan Slott's ass.
That, and I mean, for a lot of people just starting out, too, they may be more familiar with Peter Parker as Spider-Man, so it might be a bit jarring for people. Also, 0 props for stealing 3 of my picks.
All right, Ryan, suggestions?
Well, I already did mine, remember? I said, the 3 earlier, so... I struggled with picking Wolverine and the X-Men because I think it's a little more niche than the other 2. I really think, Hawkeye and Daredevil are 2 that pretty much anyone can pick up and enjoy.
Well, the Hawkeye is the Matt Fraction run, and the Daredevil is the Mark Waid run, right?
Yeah, and to be fair, there's other stuff too. I mean, X-Men just relaunched with an all-female team, and it's female members that people from the 90s who watched the cartoon will know the majority of. The only one who wasn't in it a lot that's in this is Psylocke, really. And so, I mean, that's also an option. It just started over at number 1. However, having said that, they're all characters that are in Wolverine and the X-Men as well, so maybe that's the right pick. I don't know.
And honestly, I think it's like, what, 20-some issues into the current Ultimate Comics Spider-Man, which is, if you haven't read Ultimate Comics, is Ultimate Peter Parker died trying to save Captain America.
Killed by the Punisher, baby.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And then he wades into a crowd of police. Punish me! He's just like a masochist now. But the current
he's
Ultimate
fine in the end, though. I like how they closed it out with him back in a prison torturing all the prisoners.
Yeah, but the current Ultimate Spider-Man, I would highly suggest if you want to get something that's not Peter Parker. Yeah, Miles Morales. Again, bitten by one of the last remaining Oscorp genetically altered spiders. He gets a couple of new superpowers, which basically gets like a venom shock, and he can turn invisible. And they had where Earth 616, like Peter Parker Spider-Man, got sucked into the Ultimate Universe, and he literally gave Miles Morales a pair of web shooters, which I thought was really cool. And it's only about 22 or 23 issues into the series right now, and that's something anybody would be able to pick up and catch up on pretty darn quick.
Alrighty then. Well, we're gonna head out of the pull bag this time around. Next week, I have no idea what we're doing for episode 21. No clue. So keep reading those comics, and we will talk to you later.
Bye.
I'm okay. Adamantium skeleton.
You just heard the latest episode of The Pull Bag, GCRN's comic book review podcast. There are several ways to get in touch with us and leave feedback for the show. You can visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on the episode and all of our different podcasts. You can rate our show on iTunes. Be sure to leave us feedback. Call the voicemail line, 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you were leaving the message for, and your name. Become a fan of us on Facebook by searching Geekcast Radio Network. You can send us an email, feedback@geekcastradio.com. Follow us on Twitter @GeekCastRadio. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.